Angela Merkel is one of the most powerful women in the world, and she's looking to stay at the helm after nearly 12 years as Germany's leader. She grew up in East Germany during the Cold War, and she worked as a physicist before turning her mind to politics. Merkel frequently uses her science chops for work. She is systematic and analytical. Voters have liked her steady approach. She became Germany's first female chancellor in 2005, and she has played a major role in tackling global crises ever since. In 2014, she led world leaders in imposing crippling economic sanctions on Russia after the country annexed Crimea, and she did this even though it hurt Germany's own trade interests. In 2015, she brokered a big bailout for Greece after the country found itself in serious debt, and that helped to keep the Eurozone from falling apart. Now, in that same year, Merkel welcomed hundreds of thousands of refugees into Germany, setting aside billions of euros for their housing and care. Voters initially welcomed the move, but there was backlash. Refugee homes in a number of states were burned in protest against this policy. Now Merkel is navigating a stormy relationship with U.S. President Donald Trump. After a face-to-face meeting between the two, Merkel said, quote, "The times when we could completely rely on others are to an extent over. We Europeans must really take our fate into our own hands."
German workers win right to 28-hour week by Alana Petrov at Alan Apetroff. February 7, 2018, 11:25 a.m. Eastern Time. Millions of German workers are winning the fight for a 28-hour work week. Labor union IG Metall secured an unprecedented deal this week to give a large portion of its 2.3 million members more flexible working hours and a big pay rise. From next year, workers at many of Germany's top engineering firms, such as Mercedes-Benz owner Daimler, DDAIF, can opt to work 28 hours a week for up to 2 years, before returning to the standard 35-hour week. The deal was negotiated with representatives of more than 700 companies in southwest Germany. It is expected to have ripple effects across German industry. "This sets the standard for everyone else," said Megan Greene, chief economist at Manulife Asset Management. IG Metall said the flexibility would help employees who want to care for children or relatives. Pay will be reduced to reflect the shorter working week. The deal also gives workers the option to work 40 hours to earn more. German workers are taking advantage of low unemployment and strong economic growth to flex their muscles. "You can expect similar deals to come in other sectors and regions soon," said Famke Krummuller, a partner at Open Cities, a political risk consultancy. And non-unionized workers could also benefit from the agreement, as firms that employ IG Metall workers offer the same terms to their wider workforce. Related, Ryanair boss to angry pilots. "Bring it on." Daimler said it would offer the new flexible hours to all its employees starting in 2019, but noted it already offered many flexible working options. Bosch, which employs 138,000 people in Germany, said it would offer the same pay rises and perks to the majority of its German workers. It said the flexible hours wouldn't be disruptive. Bosch already has about 100 different working hour models to ensure an optimum work-life balance, said Simon Schmidt, a company spokesperson. But other companies may find it harder to swallow. Südwestmetall, the employers' association that agreed the deal, said it was a compromise with some painful elements. It would be hard to bear for many firms, it added. Südwestmetall spokesperson Volker Steinmeier said the shorter working week could lead to labor shortages. However, most workers are likely to want to work extra hours to make more money, he said. Related, Mercedes-Benz hits pothole in China with Dalai Lama post. A couple of companies already give their employees a choice to work 30, 35 and 40 hours. Most of the employees choose to work longer and earn more, he said. Germany's surging economy could be the ultimate winner as workers covered by the deal go out and spend more. IG Metall said its members would get a 4.3% raise, starting in April. That equates to a rise of about 3.5% on average in 2018, according to Florian Hentz, an economist at Berenberg Bank. This is good for workers, said Hentz. They will see their pay rise by far more than inflation. This raises their disposable income and spending power. Südwestmetall, the employers' association that agreed the deal, said it was a compromise with some painful elements. It would be hard to bear for many firms, it added. Südwestmetall spokesperson Volker Steinmeier said the shorter working week could lead to labor shortages. However, most workers are likely to want to work extra hours to make more money, he said. Related, Mercedes-Benz hits pothole in China with Dalai Lama post. A couple of companies already give their employees a choice to work 30, 35 and 40 hours. Most of the employees choose to work longer and earn more, he said. Germany's surging economy could be the ultimate winner as workers covered by the deal go out and spend more. IG Metall said its members would get a 4.3% raise, starting in April. That equates to a rise of about 3.5% on average in 2018, according to Florian Hentz, an economist at Berenberg Bank. This is good for workers, said Hentz. They will see their pay rise by far more than inflation. This raises their disposable income and spending power. %3 raise, starting in April. That equates to a rise of about 3.5% on average in 2018, according to Florian Hentz, an economist at Berenberg Bank. This is good for workers, said Hentz. They will see their pay rise by far more than inflation. This raises their disposable income and spending power. This raises their disposable income and spending power.
Germany has done a very good job of protecting its domestic industries and protecting its workers. My understanding is that by law, any corporation with over 1,000 employees has to have half their board of directors made up of union members. What's the percentage of union membership in Germany?
In a whole, it's about 20%. In the Deutsche Telekom, we have 75%. There are also big differences within Germany.
How so?
Yes, because there are traditional companies with a long history. They often have also a long trade union history, and the new sectors, for example, in Germany, especially call centers or the retail sector or other service sectors, modern sectors, their trade unions have, yes, they have difficulties to come in, to organize people, but I think this is going on now. But the problem is that always if trade unions come and say, let's organize, let's fight for higher wages, then is the argument, yes, if you are successful with higher wages and so on, then this company, for example, will go to the United States or to China or elsewhere, because there are lower standards, there are no no trade unions which make us difficulties and set us under public pressure and so on, and therefore it's also a problem for the German workers.
Yes. So George Kohl, German member of parliament, saying, please don't keep doing this race to the bottom, America, because it will infect Germany. Right. How do we stop the race to the bottom here in the United
That's
States?
the key question. And when we talk about globalization, when others talk about globalization, too often they forget that around the rest of the world, everybody else has better collective bargaining than we do in the United States.
At least in the developed world.
Even in the underdeveloped world, in Korea, in Brazil, in South Africa now, they all have better collective bargaining than we do.
Wow.
So that in terms of the race up, we need to look around the world and pick a standard of collective bargaining that is a positive one in order for us to raise up. One of the exports from the United States is this union intolerance, and as Klaus said, it's a danger to Europe, which is why then that the World Trade Union movement said that they need to expect better from Deutsche Telekom. We need to stop union avoidance by Deutsche Telekom, and we need to change the situation. And that's why the member from Parliament is here. And in the United States, we had the members of Congress also kind of express an opinion. You know, the way to the future is to raise wages up, not to drive everything to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah, and it just makes sense. You know, a country is either spiraling up or they're spiraling down,
right.
and we seem to be spiraling down. Germany at least seems to be holding their own for the moment, but you know, how much influence does the German government have over DT and DT over T-Mobile?
German government keeps nearly 1/3 of the shares, but under the conditions of the liberalization, which was decided in Germany in the middle of the 90s, the state decided not to deal with these shares and to be something like as a calm stakeholder and to do nothing what might disturb the stock exchange and and the analysts and so on and the investors, and therefore the state keeps out of this discussion. And I think we must try as members of the parliament
arguably because they really worked hard to make changes, and what the U.S. can learn there is that we too could potentially do that.
This is At Brookings, a weekly in-depth look at issues behind the news. This week, the German labor market miracle and lessons for the U.S. economy.
Millions of American workers have lost jobs in the Great Recession, and many are still struggling to find work. And the same holds true for other industrialized nations where unemployment remains high. But workers have fared better in Germany due to its labor market miracle, explains fellow Elizabeth Jacobs as she looks at the factors that made the difference. Tell me a little bit about German labor market policy that helped them weather both the Great Recession and do better in the recovery than we're doing here in the U.S.
German employers were far more likely to reduce their workers' hours and then hire them back full-time when the recession was done with and when demand really returned. Whereas in the U.S. we saw employers shed their workers and they just haven't really hired them back in the same way. So that was sort of the main difference in why the employment picture is so different in the two countries.
And Elizabeth, you write that there are both private and public incentives that make it easier for employers to keep people on the job rather than laying them off.
On the public side, and a lot of other people have pointed this out, Germany has this part of their unemployment insurance system called short-time compensation. And it is what it sounds like, just to kind of parse it. The idea is compensating workers when their hours are reduced. And so firms can basically continue to pay their workers their normal salaries. There's actually a little bit of a reduced salary. And the unemployment system, in turn, will then compensate those firms. And so it incentivizes the firms to hold on to their workers. The system helps pay for their social insurance benefits, so things like health care and their retirement benefits. Those don't end up costing the firm in the way they might if they didn't get help from the government.
And then there's also Germany's flexible working tool time kit. What is it? How does it work?
Over the course of the last couple of decades, German employers working together with organized labor, which is a very big deal in Germany, and with the state have come up with this system of what I and some others have called this flexible working time toolkit, which is really an idea of incentivizing flexibility around hours in exchange for holding on to workers. And we don't do that in the same way in the U.S. For a variety of reasons. We tend to shed workers as opposed to holding on to them. And that's really made the difference between the two countries, is the way that both public and private incentives in Germany have helped employers hold on to their workers as opposed to let them go.
Elizabeth, tell me about working time accounts, which is one of the things in this toolkit we're talking about.
They're essentially like time banks. That's the way I like to think about it, that this is something that Germany's largely unionized workforce agreed to as a concession for some job security. And the idea is we'll work overtime hours without demanding overtime pay so long as you bank those hours. And you only work out overtime when time is good and demand is high. And so you're banking hours. And then in turn, if you need to cut hours back, rather than cutting my regular pay, I'll get that pay back later when times are bad. Now it's not obvious why that would keep workers or keep employers from letting workers go. The reason is sort of in the details of the contract. Employers have to pay those workers everything that's left in those accounts plus a severance if they were to fire those workers during downtimes. And so it really incentivizes things for the employer to hold on to those workers rather than let them go because it's cheaper.
And again, in comparing the U.S. to Germany when it comes to the labor market, Germany tends to take a longer view of what's going on in its labor market and how things could impact it down the road. We don't do that.
Their employers are much more coordinated, their unions are much more coordinated in terms of really developing this high skills workforce. And so employers have a real incentive to hold on to those employees because they've put real time and money and energy into making sure that those employees can deliver exactly what they need. We don't do that in the U.S. I mean, we really don't. We have a handful of model employers who do that. But for the most part, workforce development is the purview of the states, the counties, community colleges. It's kind of all over the place. So there's no real incentive to hold on to your workers because you can always hopefully find another one. Now, I argue that that's actually it's short-term thinking, and in the long run, we're paying for it because firms have to pay for recruitment and retraining and all kinds of kind of hidden costs of using layoffs instead of reductions. But that long view in Germany is arguably what's helping their labor market perform better, and I think it's also part of the key to their success.
And all of this, Elizabeth, is pretty much an about-face for a country that was once known as the sick man of Europe.
It was actually the Economist magazine who first called Germany the sick man of Europe, and that was because they had this economy that was going nowhere. They had high and growing unemployment, and it was really kind of a mess. Part of that was just 1980s economic change and Germany really struggling to figure out how to make sense of that. And then they kind of had this double whammy when German unification happened, and they inherited essentially this whole other economy that had been in East Germany was now part of West Germany, and they had to put the two together, and that really sent the labor market into something of a tailspin. And over the course of the last couple of decades, the unions and employers and the German state have really kind of worked together to try and adapt, to figure out a way to pick their economy up and make it work.
Stay up to date with the latest research, learn about Brookings events, and search our directory of experts, all from your mobile device. To download Brookings for your BlackBerry, Android, iPhone, or iPad, go to brookings.edu/mobile.